baby, wait. I know that you're afraid, but it'll be okay if you just stay with me. We can run from here and we can disappear, and they won't find us where we are going, dear. So baby, hold on to me, 'cause I know I can make you believe in something that only we can see. Oh, so baby, hold on to me, hold on to me.
Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That's right, I am your host, Kev Baker, and I'm coming to you live from that smart city over here in Scotland. Yes, Glasgow, all the way around the world to the USA, Australia, probably the continent of Africa, up into Asia. So many people listening around the world to the Truth Frequency Radio right here at www.tfrlive.com. So it's the last show of the week already. Seriously, where does the time go? And we're going to be chilling out, we're going to be relaxing. It's just me and all of you today. Yes, Jimmy Jeans may be here for hour number 2. We'll see how things go. We've got a couple of things I want to get into, but a little bit of housekeeping, bit of admin. We'll get that out of the way while we're still waiting for people to turn up. And of course, you'll all be pleased to hear this is the last time that we'll be at the earlier time of 9 p.m. in the UK, or an hour earlier if you're over on continental Europe, because thankfully at the weekend, finally, our clocks, there's a bit of parity, is resumed, because we'll be putting our clocks forward. Yes, spring forward, fall back, all that kind of jazz. Still no idea why in the year 2019 we still feel the need to change the clocks at all. And if we're going to do it, can we at least do it on a global level all at once? Might be a little globalist by saying that. But let's get into the housekeeping, and a big thank you to everyone that's in the chat room and listening around the world right now. Since there's only a few people in there, I'll give you a quick shout out, Freaky Friday style, right? We've got Sophia the bot. Always love Sophia being in there. We've got Lynn, Polynation, Drone Free Zone, DJ Caveman, Bam, Dawn to you too, and the brilliant R-Man. So shh, don't tell anyone else when they all start turning up that you got a special shout out today. And of course, you can join them all over at tfrlive.com/chat. It's totally free, and it's absolutely brilliant to hang out in there. So I've been making a big song and a dance to the fact that one of the people who has been so instrumental in the person you see today, especially as a presenter, as a host, has to be David Icke. And of course, I've been blowing my own trumpet so much over the last week or so because David Icke was due to come on the show on April the 8th. Now, obviously, you've guessed there, something's happened. Was due to come on the show. Well, you know, after a lovely kind of email exchange today from David's team, and they were really so gracious, so polite about everything, that they came to me and they informed me that unfortunately, because there's a new movie coming out about David, Renegade it's called, I believe there's a new book coming out as well, things are a bit hectic around that time, so we're going to reschedule, but we've got the date. They've already given us the date, so don't panic, folks. It's going to be May the 28th. So never fear, it's all sorted, and that's thanks to the people behind David. I believe one of his children that actually runs the admin side of things. So a big shout out to Jamie for smoothing all of that over and letting me know and letting all of the audience know so early. So remark the calendar, folks. Either rub it out, I hope it was in pencil, or if it's in pixels on your planner, on the PC, on the laptop, whatever, just take that off, and May the 28th. But hopefully, since it's going to be a bit of time now between now and then, I'm going to be able to organise David being on camera, hopefully, so that after the fact, obviously you'll hear it first here on TFR, but after the fact it will be in a video presentation style form. I think people definitely appreciate that approach a lot more these days. So there you go, 28th of April. And Lynn says he should do at least a full hour for that. Maybe we can twist his arm, okay? Maybe he will enjoy the Kev Baker experience as much as I think every other guest that's come on here. I've never had any problems with any of the guests. They've been very appreciative of the way things goes down on KBS. So maybe, Lynn, maybe I'll be able to twist his arm. But something that's coming up a lot sooner than May the 28th, that is this weekend. on Saturday, I'm going to be joined by Nano Girl on the live stream over on YouTube, so watch for announcements about that. There'll also be a members-only kind of cozy live stream on the Sunday. I'll be letting people know about that via YouTube, so keep your eyes open if you're a member of the YouTube channel. Now then, with that out of the way, let's get back into some of the stuff that we've got lined up for today. And of course, I've been speaking quite a lot about hashtag Save Your Internet, Article 13, all that jazz. Well, you know, get this, folks, because as horrible a thing as this is, how I've been saying it's going to change the way that we share information and the way the internet looks forever. You know, we were that close, just so close to actually avoiding it. I'm being serious. You know, they had a vote the other day, as we've been talking about now for the past 2 nights. And the MEPs that took part in the vote, well, there was a bit of shenanigans went on. I'm not kidding you. Says here, MEPs tricked into voting the wrong way, but the EU refuses to do a do-over. Shocking example of the EU's Byzantine tyranny. Sorry for mispronouncing that there. And I'm getting this story from Infowars, and it's Paul Joseph Watson that wrote this. And I'm confidently reading from this story because hopefully, you know, Infowars won't put in some kind of copyright claim against me. However, what I'm going to be doing in the next coming weeks or so is approaching websites like Infowars, like other alternative news sites out there. And I'm actually going to be getting in some digital form, be it email or some kind of written confirmation that I do in fact have permission to use their content. And that way, I'll try and jump through the hoops the EU are putting in front of us. But to get back to this story here, this shows you what this EU is all about. It's an absolute joke. It says the 13 MEPs were tricked into voting for the European Union Copyright Directive when they initially planned to vote against it. A crucial error which led to a measure passing by just 5 votes. So this is important. You know, there was 13 people that basically were misled into voting one way when they intended to vote another. And when something passes by 5 votes, that makes 13 highly significant. It says, quote, as an extra vote was inserted into the voting list at the last minute, which threw most MEPs' voting list out of sync, reports Guido Fawkes' blog. Now, unlike the Commons, where MEPs have to physically make the decision to walk through lobbies, MEPs just robotically press buttons according to a long voting list handed out to them. A clear warning of the dangers of electronic voting. Now, since the measure passed by a mere 5 votes, the 13 votes that went wrong were crucial to the outcome. If the MEPs had not been tricked, they would have been blocked from voting. They would not have been blocked from voting on amendments to the bill, including the notorious Article 13. However, despite complaints were actually raised about this. Did the EU listen? Don't be kidding me on. Says the EU has refused to revisit the result of the vote or hold the vote again, merely agreeing to change the voting record of the individual MEPs. Quote, it's appalling, but that's how this place works on a regular basis, said Brexit Party MEP Bill Etheridge. It's only come to people's attention this time because it's a high-profile issue. That's important to note, folks. This is the way that the EU rolls. They're tyrannical, they're dictatorial, they're just unelected at this very, very top end. Now, I'm going to get into more of that in just a moment, but to finish this article off here, it says this is a shocking illustration of how the EU operates. The vote has basically been stolen, and yet the European Parliament refuses to do anything about it. Critics say that Article 13 will force social media companies to introduce filters that will automatically block content uploaded by users. This would include transformative content, including memes that are widely considered fair use, but would now be blocked by the filter. Exactly what we were talking about last night. And such a system would also be completely open to abuse in terms of censoring free speech. So there you have it there. We actually, the MEPs that were voting on this, they had made their minds up to at least make amendments to this bill. And because they switched things around at the last minute and they've got this weird electronic system where you just press a button, we can see how 13 votes went the wrong way, and this led to Article 11 and Article 13 passing. Now, somebody else who's been speaking about this is a dude called, and I just need to dig it up here, folks. Bear with me one moment. I've got it here. His name is Gerard Batten. Now, he's the leader of UKIP. And I'm not a UKIP supporter in any way, shape, or form. You know me. And anyone who doesn't know me, just to give you the basics, I don't trust any political party. I don't lean one way or another. I think they're all dodgy, and none of them have our best interests at heart, right? But what this cat has to say about the passing of Article 13, I think it's worth listening to. Just take a listen to this.
No one is against fair copyright and protecting the legitimate rights of authors, but this directive is about promoting the interests of multinational corporations and maximising their profits. It is also about controlling and shutting down free speech and dissent, not approved of by the media and political establishments. Dissenting voices are already being deplatformed and demonetised, and this will institutionalise censorship. UKIP MEPs and others forced a vote on this directive using the rules of procedures. Otherwise, it would have gone through on the nod last year. MPs should take note that the European elections will follow shortly. Voters should take note of who voted, which MEPs and which parties voted for this directive, and they should vote against them on the 23rd of May. The European Union and the political and media establishments want to suppress free speech and dissent. If MPs vote for this directive, then they deserve to lose their seats.
You see, so that there is Gerard Batten. That comes from the UKIP official channel over on YouTube. And obviously they're quite outspoken a lot of the time. I like a lot of what they say at the European Union. But how far does it get us, folks? What do people like Nigel Farage and all the other people at the EU have been outspoken over the years? What does it really get us? Yeah, they get their 60 seconds or their 90 seconds, whatever ridiculous amount of time they get to stand up and say their thing. But what does it really do? Because nothing that's said there has any weight behind it. It doesn't carry any force. It all goes to that membership, that council at the very top, and they're the ones sitting there quaffing the champagne and eating the prawn vol au and spending about $500 a day on lunches and expenses and things. And they don't give a damn about any of us. And I remember way back in the day, we had Jordan Maxwell on the show. Also people like David Icke as well, who I mentioned earlier. Always used to hear him talking about this, how, when you're looking at a game in particular, when you're comparing tennis to what goes on in a court of law, you've got somebody that bats it from one side back to the other, and then back and forth, and like the crowd just sit there watching it, right? And it's very much the same thing, not in a court, but in the UK Parliament, over in the Parliament, the kind of Tower of Babel they've got over there in the EU, even over in the US as well, because what really happens, you get one player standing up and playing his shot, he'll say his piece, and then you get somebody else standing up and they'll say their piece, and it keeps going like that, vice versa, and all of us watch it, and it's, everyone's taking to social media to talk about it, and la-di-da, but it's no different than people saying you're being distracted by a sport. Because in the end of the day, it must all be theatre. Why must it all be theatre? Because for all the good ideas that you hear in these political courts, these game courts, these games arenas, these places where political theatre's carried out, for all the good stuff you hear, how much of it ever comes into effect? None of it. So basically, you can say it's all been said for entertainment value. That's what it boils down to. That's why sometimes I have a little snigger on my face when people say, oh, you're distracted by that sport you like, Kev. And then I see them posting about politics online. And I think I'm distracted. Really? It's no different. Absolutely no different, folks. And, you know, we've got our Brexit thing. It's still rumbling on over here. And, of course, Theresa May now, she's kind of put a timetable on when she's going to be going. And I was taking a look around today to see what genius they're going to throw our way next. And it doesn't matter who they give us. It really doesn't, because so many people have the knives out for Theresa May. And I don't mean physically, I mean metaphorically, because of the bad job she's done over Brexit. And that's another thing I smile at. A bad job from whose point of view? From our point of view that voted for it? Sure. Not from the MEPs that make up stupid things like Article 13 and rig votes to get their own way. See how they rig votes in their own parliament to get things just the way they want it? Especially when they know things aren't working the way that they might want the agenda to go. So they rig the vote, they throw in something at the last minute, they confuse people. Now do you see why they have no intentions of letting us British people leave via our Brexit vote that we put in? And like I say, it doesn't need to have been Theresa May. It could have been anyone that took over from David Cameron. They're all puppets. They're all just one of these players. Yeah, they're a more important player. They get more time on the court. More court time. More air time. More distraction time. Because while you're watching all of that, let's not, argue over what side's better or what person's going to be better or not. Because look at what's happening in the world. None of them are fixing anything. I know I'm preaching to the choir with all of you people out there, but I thought it'd be quite fun to take a look at what puppet will be taking over from Theresa May next. What kind of flavour of politics can we expect coming from 10 Downing Street? Is it going to be somebody as flamboyant as the Donald? Orange man bad, orange man good. Wish it would be. That would spice things up, because politics over here, it's so boring. How people can watch that, it's truly beyond me. Even the politicians over here can't be bothered taking part in our politics. Again, it goes back to that whole theatre aspect, right? They're all told when to be in the House of Commons when a big vote's coming up. And then the vote comes and they vote the way that the party told them to, or they get the whip out, they get punished. And when I say they get punished, what that means is after they retire to the bar, after the big vote where everyone's been there, it's going to be a vote about something really stupid. But, a constituent somewhere in the UK has told their parliamentarian to bring it up. And it's almost like they probably draw short straws, or if they voted the wrong way in one of the big votes, that they're one of the fools that have to go in there and sit there. You've all seen it. 5 or 6 people, half of them drunk, the other half of them asleep. And that's the way it goes, because they're just players. They're just in there. They're just acting a part. They don't represent us. They don't do anything for us. It's like a room full of TV actors, TV extras. They're all in the bar in Parliament, quaffing away, getting drunk, probably sexually harassing barmaids. It's the House of Parliament. Probably the women politicians are doing that as well. And then, they get the call, right, we need 7 to go in. We've got a farming thing. We need to look like we're interested in. Not the farming thing. Oh, here we go again. And, they play short straws and 5 unlucky losers. Maybe they have to go in and watch the farming debate. Why? Just so it looks like people are interested. Looks like they're doing something. There they are. They spoke about that farming thing. That's getting dealt with. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. It's the biggest show in the universe. Truly, truly is. I've said it all along. Voting just encourages them. It truly, truly does. And the deeper I go down the rabbit hole, the more I see how it all works. That's why it can frustrate me at times, the more I see people falling back into the, well, my side's better than your side mentality. Oh, really? It's all sides of that same mutated backside that I've spoke about for so long. And you call that mutated backside politics. Just that level in the system, in the pyramid, if you want to put it that way. And it's not the top. These people are puppets. So, who's our next puppet going to be in the UK? Well, let's have a look. Let's have a look at the hit parade, eh? The magic rundown. So first up, we've got, Michael Gove. Now, this dude, he looks like somebody's puppet. See, like the old days puppets. And it even says this in here. It says the Environmental Secretary, 51. who continues to resemble a ventriloquist dummy from the 1950s, led the victorious Vote Leave campaign in 2016 along with Boris Johnson. Now, he was sacked as Education Secretary by Theresa May, but made a surprisingly successful comeback when he rejoined the cabinet in 2017. Oh, well, they must have had lots of dirt on Michael Gove. He must still be a useful character that they can throw into this political mix that we're talking about. So, Michael Gove, how's he going to be as a leader? Is he going to be that kind of a flamboyant character? No, he's going to be a warmonger. Take a listen to this. This is Ken Clark on, they call it a hot mic, but this was absolutely caught on purpose. Sky News caught it. This is Ken Clark talking to one of the political journalists at Sky News, or Sky Lies as I call them, and take a listen to what he has to say about Michael Gove. Oh, dearie me.
But it's what a fiasco.
I don't mind who wins as long as Gove becomes third.
As long as who?
As long as Gove is not in the final two, I don't mind what happens.
Now, what he said there was, I don't mind who goes, as long as Gove comes in the final third. Okay, so that's the Sky dude that said that. But take a listen to what Ken Clark's got to say about this potential leader of Britain.
I don't think the membership will vote for Gove.
No, they won't.
I remember being in a discussion once about something we should do in somewhere like Syria or Iraq, and he was so wild that I remember exchanging looks with Liam Fox, who's quite a much more right-wing than me, but we were exchanging views, and Liam was raising eyebrows. I mean, I think with Michael as Prime Minister, we'd go to war with at least 3 countries at once. He did us all a favour by getting rid of Boris, who just... the idea of Boris as Prime Minister is ridiculous.
And that could have happened.
I don't think either Andrea Leadsom or Boris Johnson actually in favour of leaving the European Union.
Well, I don't think they cared very much either way.
No, it was the obvious thing that the voters, i.e. Conservative Party members, were going to vote leave. She's not one of the minus tiny band of lunatics who think we can have a sort of glorious economic future outside the single market. So long as she understands that she's not to deliver on some of the extremely stupid things she's been saying. She's just a bloody difficult woman, but you and I work for Margaret Thatcher.
You and I worked for Margaret Thatcher. Speaking to a journalist? Really? Just saying, but Michael Gove, he would have us in 3 wars at once. Man, oh man. It sounds like that ventriloquist dummy that we were talking about and looking at there just a moment ago. A dangerous character. A very dangerous character indeed. And ironically, who would make money out of Michael Gove going into any wars? I tell you who would make money. I tell you who would make bucket loads of money on the back of that. Only Theresa May and her husband. Boom. Yep, he's on the board of one of these weapons companies. Bear that in mind anytime you hear of Britain firing a Tomahawk or one of these kind of smart bombs nowadays. Every time we do it, on the orders of Theresa May, her husband's going cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. That's how the game works, folks. That's how the game works. So yeah, Michael Gove, not too keen on this character coming into the mix. So who's next up? I like this. You see, this would be our version of Donald Trump. We could have a laugh with it. Remember, they're actors. They're just players. It's okay to laugh at them, okay? Says the Clown Prince, Boris Johnson, the former Foreign Secretary, and the current bumbling lunatic that is the former Mayor of London, the tussle-haired, off-brand PG Woodhouse character, 54, resigned from the cabinet over May's Chequers plan last July, but has made little secret about his ambitions. Now, a divisive figure at the best of times, the candidacy of this philandering chancer could spark a heated Stop Boris campaign among the naysayers should he reach the final 2. Can you imagine living in a country run by bumbling Boris Johnson? If that isn't a mark of how things have fallen and how things have slipped over the years, I really don't know. But again, I mustn't lose sight of the fact, and I mustn't keep reminding you, I must never stop reminding you of the fact that this is the biggest reality TV show on the planet. And it's been running for years. Whether it's Boris Johnson or Michael Gove or any of the characters we'll meet after the break, does it really matter? Left, right, left, right, back and forth, watching what's going on, all these good ideas, but what remains the same? Look around you. Everything remains the same. Because all of that, just like I get told my sport, my soccer, my football is, all of it's just a distraction on a different level. So we'll be coming back after the break. We've got lots more to get into today, folks. I don't really talk about the political thing because that's not my shtick. Okay, but when it comes to Article 13, and that leads me into the shenanigans of the MEPs, sometimes I revert to that old Kev Baker show character that took them to the woodshed. We'll be back on the other side. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to today's sermon from the Church of Kev. I'm only joking, folks. I want to thank you all for tuning in to today's broadcast of the Kev Baker Show. And like I say, it's coming to you live from this city that doesn't sleep. Sounds cool, right? But literally, I think there's something to that. Me, Anne, and my son Kevin are suffering almost a weird kind of insomnia where our body clocks have been knocked maybe 6 hours ahead of time. I know, I've been talking about the time shift, you know, poking fun at the fact we move the clocks forward in summer, but it's not that. It's not that at all. It's almost as if slowly turning night into day. It's really strange. It's got me thinking. And we had a caller last night, obviously, as well, who was talking about the fact that the moon cycles, they're also changing quite dramatically. And again, me speculating, but I have to wonder how many of these things are actually connected together. So I wonder how many of you out there listening to this as well. And again, it's only such a small fraction of people we get in the chat room over at tfrlive.com/chat, but I'd be interested to know if this is something you're experiencing. Could be like an addition, an addendum to that out of whack, out of kilter experience I was kind of talking about a few weeks ago, maybe. And that weird creaky noise. I'm not doing this broadcast from a creaky bed, I promise. It's my microphone arm really needs a bit of WD-40 or some oil on it or something. So if you hear squeaking, I'm not keeping like some kind of chipmunk or meerkat beside me. I quite like a meerkat. Meerkats are quite cool. How did I get talking about meerkats? So let's get back into this, folks, because before the break I was giving you the list of shame. The list of shame of potential candidates to take over running this pesky country after Theresa May packs up her bags and goes home. So we got as far as my personal favourite, only because it would be so easy to make content on the back of things he says. Imagine bumbling Boris at the UN, giving his annual speech on behalf of the British Isles and the people here. That would be priceless, folks. He'd probably turn up and, he'd cycle into the whole UN building. He's bumbling Boris. You wouldn't be able to trust him. So that, for me, the fact you can't trust what comes out of Boris's mouth. I mean, remember, he's a Bullingdon boy. He went to that, the same kind of boys' club thing as David Cameron, the ones that would burn £50 notes in front of homeless people as part of their initiation into that fraternity, Yeah, that same, cut from the same cloth. So I see he's from the same club, but just not as controllable as, say, the puppet that David Cameron was. So who's next? I hear you all asking. Well, I hope you're asking. Well, next one, somebody I don't really know much about at all. Like I said, I don't pay too much attention to politics. And this guy's name is Dominic Raab. It says Dominic Raab, 44, was once the chief of staff to Brexit Secretary David Davis. Well, that went well. You must be an absolute genius, Your Brexit plan went really well, Dominic. Before succeeding his old boss and then succumbing to precisely the same fate. Yeah, he was one of the people that fell on the sword. When Theresa May was having such hard problems getting things done, she was doing a good job. She was doing what she was meant to do on behalf of her Nazi EU handlers. And I know I don't have to tell all of you great people listening to TFR that, but that's what you have to tell people when you hear them talking about this nonsense. Point at the EU and point at it and call it what it is. It's the birth child of the Nazis. They wanted a European superstate, and that's what we're in right now. You know, don't be scared to call something Nazi when it is technically Nazi, okay? It says he proved more effective as a campaigner for Leave in 2016 than did in his dealings with Brussels, complaining the Prime Minister did not keep him in the loop during negotiations because you're just an actor as well, Dominic. Get with the script, pal. It says Raab has recently been the subject of much satire after LBC radio host James O'Brien circulated a video of his his contradictory statements about Brexit, prompting him to block O'Brien and the video to get even more traction. Now, I think this is it here. We'll try and play it. We'll see if this works. And, of course, it doesn't work, so that's okay then. So we've got him, right? Now, I've heard of this cat before, Jeremy Hunt. He used to be the health secretary, and they didn't call him Jeremy Hunt, but they gave him a name that rhymed with Hunt, okay? You can use your imagination out there. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to imagine what Jeremy gets called. So the long-serving health secretary, 52, briefly backed a second referendum. Enemy of democracy, traitor, treasonous. See? We don't want him in charge of the country. He'll sell us out. So he wanted a second referendum to give the public a final say. Oh, wow. You know, it's like being treated like naughty children. You know, you've been bad, but we're going to give you one more chance. We're going to give you one more chance to prove to us that you can vote the way that we want you to vote. Okay? Like the naughty little children you were. Tut, tut, tut. Remember, if you don't vote the right way this time, the sky's going to fall down, cows will stop making milk, and your Netflix won't work in Benidorm when you go on holiday. So, vote right. It's pathetic how they treat us. It truly is. But it says here, he's apparently known as Teflon Jeremy because so little of the criticism he receives sticks, and there's plenty. Then we've got this character here, who in my opinion is the dark horse outsider. And he is, of course, Sajid Javid, the ambitious Javid, Javid, 48, was once considered a rising star of the party thanks to his impressive way he ticked a few diversity boxes. Oh, did I say that? No, his backstory is that he's the son of a Pakistani bus conductor who arrived in Britain with just £1 in his pocket, but rose to become, I'll get this, a wealthy banker. Oh, yeah, he arrived here with the £1 in his pocket. We'll get the sob story going. We're trying to drum up a bit of heartstrings for this character. And in comparison to the other characters I've read out, he gets 3 or 4 paragraphs. The other ones get 1 or 2. That might seem like nothing, but it means something. It does. The media are trying to point you somewhere. It says, his quick assent to Home Secretary. So his parents or his grandparents arrive here with a quid in their pocket, and he ends up being a high-powered banker and then Home Secretary. Somebody isn't guiding this guy's career, right? No? You think? Maybe. I'd say so. So it says here, his quick assent to Home Secretary has seen his reputation fall away somewhat. His handling of migrants attempting to cross the English Channel and decision to strip ISIS bride Shamima Begum of her UK citizenship, winning few admirers. He voted to remain in Europe in 2016 referendum against his instincts as a Eurosceptic. So he was out there playing the part of, yeah, I'm a Eurosceptic, we should leave. But when it came to the crunch, when it came to that time to vote, remember how I tell you how it works? They get told what way to vote and what way not to. He was told, doesn't matter what you've said. You know, it's okay, Sajid. Nobody will remember. People will forget. The media is going to paint you up as some kind of darling. You're going to be the kind of, you're our next boy. We're going to continue grooming you for high office, sir. Yeah, this is the one we need to watch. And it says here, under pressure from David Cameron and George Osborne, that's what made him change his mind. Those are his handlers. He's got some high-powered people pulling his strings, doesn't he? David Cameron and, you know, cokehead George Osborne. And I call him cokehead George Osborne because he's a cokehead. I've got absolutely no fear of him taking me to court for defamation of character. I wish he would. We could show umpteen pieces of footage where You know, you've got the white powder around his nostrils while he's sitting in Parliament. You know, remember how they've been out in the pub and they get told to come in for certain votes and things? Yeah, George didn't go to the pub. No, George was often seen bent over the cubicle in the toilet. Ah, yes. Some of Escobar's finest marching powder. That's how these cats roll. And, you know, something like that's enough for them to get something over you, you know. You like your Coke a bit too much, controllable. That's how you see him getting promoted to higher levels. They've probably got something on Sajid Javid as well. That's why he rose through power. Maybe he's seen something when he was in banking. Maybe he's the one that has a bit of information on people. Maybe that's what he's used to leverage to get his way up the ladder. Because make no mistake about it, that's how this game works. And I know it sounds old hat, but I think it's important that we have to go back to these basics and point out that the left, right, they're all part of this criminal gang. Too many people are forgetting, folks, it's a rigged game. If this whole political system and thing worked, and we had the input that we think we have, close your eyes and wouldn't it make sense then that things would have got better in the world? I mean, if we're giving these people all of our best ideas and politics works, right? Eventually they've got to get something right. Or else there's something far wrong. And it can be red this year, blue in the next cycle, green the next cycle after that. And the thing will be, we'll still all be sitting here talking about the same stuff. How can that be if it's real? How can it be if these people truly do have that power to make change? And it never gets done. These are all rhetorical questions. I know you know the score. But we have to make sure we keep hammering at people now. It can be so easy for us all to be distracted by this, that, and the next thing. Anything that we pay attention to is distracting us from something. Anything. Whether it's the most important story that's broken 5,000 years, it's still keeping our attention away from something, isn't it? So everything's a distraction. But when it comes to politics, when we're seeing more and more people thinking that we can have an answer via one character or another, me personally, I'm certainly going to be doubling down my efforts to make sure people know that these characters do not have our best interests at heart, folks. They truly don't. They only care about themselves. And we can go dark and ooga booga because there's, like I said earlier on, politics, the puppets that are in there, it's one layer of that pyramid. It's close to the top, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they're totally toothless and they're not important. That'd be ridiculous. Very important. However, they're not the ones that are calling the shots, right? And I'm not even talking about these bloodline families, you know, the ones that we sometimes don't talk about. Yeah, we talk about the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and you hear the Carnegies coming up from time to time again. But there's other bloodline families out there that you don't hear people talking about at all. But then there's something even beyond that, isn't there? Not from our realm. It's the only thing that explains what's going on in the world today, that if you have that outside force, call it demonic, call it reptilian, call it what you will, just a different frequency, some different energy trying to manipulate this reality here, that starts to explain everything. And I know you all know this. And I know for some people just starting to wake up, maybe going from the left-right paradigm to the fact that the reason it doesn't matter is because they're all controlled by interdimensional beasties and ooga boogas. Maybe that's a stride too far. I get it, okay? But that is what's going on in the world. And we've demonstrated it time and time again. Like I say, depending on where you come from, where you were brought up, you know, your belief systems, you're going to call them demons, you're going to call them aliens, you're going to call them archons, you're going to call them jinn. Doesn't matter what you call them. I think we can all agree, right? There's something out there. Whether it's something you try to contact on a Ouija board, whether it's something you use the ghost box for, something different out there. And that, in my opinion, one of these forces, one of these entities are definitely manipulating things from the top down. And like I say, that politics is near the top. but it's not the top. And that's why, I sometimes roll my eyes when you hear people saying it's all the Freemasons' fault. It's all the Rosicrucians. It's all the Jews. It's the Zionists. No, all of these groups, they're all playing their part in the way the world works today, absolutely, but they're being controlled as well. They're not at the very top. They too are being manipulated. Crazy, crazy matrix we live in. I think this is what happens when I start hanging out with Popeye at the weekends. It makes me start to think bigger, think kind of deeper. So I'm having a look at what people in the chat room are saying. The evil energy. We've got Big Brother's New World Order has really speeded up. Too late to go back now. And I totally agree with that, Lynn. And that's not a defeatist way to look at things. It's a realist way to look at things. We know that global government in some shape or form is where they're taking us. How they get there, we can sit and we can debate and argue till the cows come home, and there'll be a lot of false flags along the way and a lot of other events that we really can't see coming. Totally catches out of left field. But eventually they do want to take us to global governance. That's the best way to manage the many when you are the very, very select few. And we see how they're going to do it. Technology. And there's no putting the brakes on technology either. I see memes sometimes talking about attacking Gwen towers and, taking out this installation or that installation. And we'll get away with that pesky 5G. We'll do away with it. So we will. No, you won't. No, you won't. And if you are somebody that thinks like that, I'm not being insulting. I'm just being real. This is a massive system that they've been putting together for years, and they've got no intentions of rolling it back now. The fact that we're hearing about it publicly means they've been using it, testing it. The military have had it for years. So this is the way it's going to be going. And with the amount of data that's in the world, take away all the New World Order stuff, all the Illuminati, Yuga Boogas. Just think of the data that we're producing every single second of every single day now. The 5G needs to come in just to handle that data alone without getting into the bad, unhealthy aspects of it, or without getting into the control aspect, the surveillance aspect. This is why it's not going anywhere. It's a necessity for the amount of data. And I'm not just talking about what's coming from our routers now. What was that article I read not long ago? Remember what it said? It was either 200 or 500 smart items are going to be in the average home. Everything is going to be networked. Absolutely everything. All data sharing, all going back to the central hub. And this is where we went into the world of edge computing as well. Remember that with Anthony Patch? I still try to keep up with what Anthony's doing. I know the conspirasphere would love to find out that there's a big beef going on between myself and Mr. Patch, and that's why we don't work together anymore. Nothing like that. And I still try to keep up with him, but that edge computing that he spoke about just before we parted ways, that's something I see more and more and more now when I'm looking at these technology and science papers. It's where the data that we're producing in our own homes, to think about it this way, is the easiest way to think about it. We're producing all of this data in our own homes, and as opposed to the AI back at Google headquarters or Facebook headquarters doing all of the number crunching, no, there'll be a very specific AI in all of the devices. Or maybe just one device, the hub that takes everything out the home, where it will optimize all of the data. So yeah, things will have been recording 24/7, and for the majority of that time, they won't have been recording anything. But all of that will be streamlined. The AI will send on the data that's relevant, just the stuff it needs to know to cut down on the time, cut down on the data that's flying around out there. And then you bring in all that augmented reality and virtual reality that we see where that's going, folks. So, Lynn, for your comment that kind of spurned me on here, that this New World Order, this global government thing, yeah, but we shouldn't let that scare us to death. We really shouldn't. Because that's one thing you've got to love about humans, aside from the fact that we see so much darkness coming from some individuals. We're absolutely brilliant when it comes to working out ways around things. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't have that real spark of ingenuity, that thinking outside the box, acting in ways that they can't predict. We aren't so predictable that the AI will know everything we're going to do. I have to truly believe that. We have that imagination. That's why I still, sit and doodle, I sit and draw, I sit and think up stories, and I watch things. And it's always important to keep that imagination alive, because I think that is what will keep us one step ahead. One step ahead in this crazy world that we're moving into. And like I say, you should never let it depress you, never let it get you down. If you're ever feeling that way about the world, you need to unplug from the info for a while. Go and enjoy what's around you. Go and walk out in nature, go and connect with family, go and connect with friends. Trust me, all of that information's still going to be waiting for you when you get back, but it puts it into perspective, right? Because in that little bubble around you, your physical world, that world that you can touch and reach out and see, a lot of the stuff we talk about hasn't really affected that yet. And we must never forget that the most important person in all of this is you. Because I've seen how this information can take its toll on people. It's done it to me, folks. All of you out there as well. You know what I mean? You've probably at times been looking at this and just want to give up. Throw your hands up in the air. But you have to remember just to kind of find that balance. It's like anything else. Because I find the research, when you're onto something, when you're looking at something, it's really addictive, You get hooked on it. You want to find that next breadcrumb that leads you to something else. And that's why, I think we have to really do things in moderation. Because like anything else that can become addictive, it can become harmful, even if we don't see it happening. And I'm not sitting here like some Oxford study saying that being into conspiracy theories damages your mental health. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. But if you're not feeling 100% right about yourself in the head, then, probably looking at some of the darker and kind of more depressing stuff in the world, it's not going to do you any good. That's a no-brainer, right? And that's why I say, unplug digitally and plug in physically. Go back to basics. Go back to going out for a cup of coffee. I went out for a coffee the other day with Big Scott. Worked with Big Scott for years. And there's absolutely nothing like going and having a physical conversation with somebody. Imagine having to say that. And I say that because myself, myself and Scott, we only maybe hook up now, maybe once every couple of weeks, right? But we'll message on iMessage, and we have a back and forth on there. And it's good. It's good to catch up on there. But then you compare it to maybe just an hour of being in each other's company, and the fact that real communication, real physical companionship and things, speaking out in the real world, not just staring at pixels with your head down. And so much of our communication, that physical communication, that's been lost, truly been lost. And where does that leave us 10, 20, 50 years down the line? Does our language skills go backwards? Are we at that point already in a hive mind where thinking is how we communicate anyway? Why open our mouths and let in some of those pesky germs that might be out there that we haven't taken our latest New World Order vaccine shot for? And of course, if you don't take the vaccine shot on time, don't be thinking you're getting the bus to come for coffee with Kev anymore. No, you'll be banned from public transport, because all of that ties in with the social scoring system. You don't think they're working on a social scoring system just for some monkey down here, one of us hairless monkeys, to throw a spanner in the works and bring down their 5G network, which is, pretty central to all that. That ain't happening. But we're almost at the end of the first hour. Maybe we'll have Jimmy for hour number 2. Maybe not. But I've got lots of news along the way. We've got some NASA news. Yes, I've been shilling for NASA big time recently. I'm hoping to get an invite, to maybe Cape Canaveral, something like that. Maybe they'll fire me to the far side of the moon. Oh, I hear you trolls. You'd love for me to get fired to the far side of the moon. But I know that you trolls you'd even think I'd fake that, right? Kev Baker, the faker. Yeah, probably. Be Capricorn 1 style. I would do it with Buzz Aldrin. Me and him would fake going down to the South Pole or something. Just to really jazz things up a little. Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit weird tonight. Somebody in the chat room talking about Schrodinger's kittens. Okay, we could get into Schrodinger's kittens. It's a really long article. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. Maybe I'll just read out the kind of twist. See, now you've shamed me into epic. Epic in the chat room, ladies and gentlemen. Shaming me. Reminding me, should I say. Not shaming. Okay, you shamed me too. Into Schrodinger's kittens. And of course, Schrodinger's cat. That's that experiment that really blows your mind the first time you hear it. It's a cat that's dead and alive at the same time. It's all about quantum superposition and about how until you observe something, it can be in multiple states at once. So what happens if you take that a step further? You've got that potentially dead and alive cat in the box with the radioactive isotope that may or may not have killed it. You've got the observer outside the box, call them Alice. But then Bob comes along. And what happens if Bob observes Alice observing Schrodinger's cat? Is there a difference between when Bob does observe Alice observing the cat to when Bob doesn't observe Alice observing the cat? This is where we take reality and what we think we knew about it, we rip it up, and we might need to start again. The quantum mechanic is telling you that there's something wrong with quantum mechanics. And that has whetted my appetite for some Schrodinger's kittens on the other side of the break. We're going to get into a massive article. We're going to break this down. We'll listen to what's going on. Maybe Jimmy will be here. Maybe Jimmy will not. But after the break, we're going to go into the weird world. Schrodinger's kittens. Oh, don't go anywhere. Hour number 2, and man, oh man, have I got news for all of you. Do you like how I done that? See, poet? No, I didn't even know it. Now, we're moving into hour number 2 on today's Kev Baker Show. And for anyone turning up late, where have you been for the past 3 weeks? This is the last time. We'll be at the earlier time of 9 p.m. in the UK. So next week, everything goes back to normal. So normal service will be resumed, and normal service has been resumed right here today on the Kev Baker Show, it would seem. Johnny Whistles is in the house. Johnny, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fine, Kev. Thanks very much. Yep, great to be back on again, because it's been a wee while, Kev, because it's been kind of up and down, but there's good days and bad days, and this is one of the good ones, so I said I won't tell Kev I'm coming on, because every time I do, something happens and I never make it, so kept it quiet, mate.
So have you still been watching your Oak Island, John?
Oh, is that good or what?
Yeah, I'm really kind of taken by this season, I must admit. More questions than answers, but doesn't every good mystery work out that way? Isn't that the one constant on our journey down the rabbit hole? More you learn, more you need to know.
Mm-hmm. That's it, especially Oak Island, Kev, because, I mean, some of the things I find down there, it's like, it shouldn't even be there, do you know what I mean? Walls, concrete walls. Where did that come from? Things like that, do you know what I mean? It's pretty strange. But where they're digging at H8, I'm really hoping something comes up from that, Kev.
Yeah, definitely. And if anyone hasn't watched that show, I highly recommend it. There's about 7 or 8 seasons now, I think, and it's the curse of Oak Island, and they say 7 must die before the island will give up its secrets. And will they get there this season? I'm not too sure, but I tell you what, there's certainly enough to warrant and justify, I've got my fingers crossed here, an upcoming season, because I can't get enough of that stuff. And yeah, that whole thing we were discussing, that, you know, Johnny, that concrete, and the fact that, you know, it looks like it's under sea level, but I think we have to, you know, start to think again outside the box and think about how this planet hasn't always looked the way that it looks now. And we're obviously, from the stuff that they're finding down there at the shoreline, I think it's quite a fair assessment to make that we're looking at construction when the sea levels were a lot lower, John.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Do you know what I mean? Because how can you construct a concrete wall on the water, Kev? It's just impossible.
Even the Romans had problems with kind of concrete under the water and things. And you're talking about, this is a major construction job that's probably cost over $1 million nowadays to actually make it possible. As good as their technology was back in the day, Johnny, this is just the way things are now, where the sea is now. It's just, it doesn't make sense. What does make sense is seas were different. Oak Island, maybe a bit bigger, a lot more shoreline exposed. That makes sense.
Definitely. I mean, as you say, Kev, a wall being there and so far under the ground just shows you how low the sea levels were at that time. As you say, Oak Island was a very big place, and now it's like the shape of a small dog. So
I think it looks like an elephant.
Without a trunk.
It's got the wee trunk turned up. It's like Dumbo. It looks like now that I've said that, you're never going to be unseeing that, John. You're going to see a little Dumbo every time you look at Oak Island. So what else you been watching, man, on the History Channel? I know you like geeking out to some of the UFO stuff. What's been happening on there, man?
There was a couple. There was one today, Kev, I was watching. It was a family, and it was in Canada. And it was a farmer out in his field, and he seen, it was like, what he says was, it was like a square, but it came up to like a pointed top, but it was kind of a rounded off, and I mean, there was no sharp objects, there was no doors, no nothing. And it was just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. And his family came out, because he had called his family, and they came out and had a look at it as well, and they were all absolutely gobsmacked. And they're asking what it was, and they said it must have been something that's just fell from the sky. He says it's not a ship, he says, or anything, because it just looks like a piece of metal. So he went to get his tractor to move it, and as soon as he started his engine, this thing moved up about 10 feet in the air and started moving across the field. And that's when it started getting pretty freaky. He says they were wondering, what in God's name is this thing? So they watched it for about 20 minutes, then it disappeared. But then when they went over to the grass, it was like a circle that had made. And even to this day, nothing grows on that ground.
Ah, man.
See, there's also, it was covered in this element, and it was, I think the element is called I6 or something like that, Kev. Now, it was abundant on where this craft had landed. Now, there's no way that you can possibly get this compound there, Kev, unless it's like the very start of a planet formation. Because, yeah, that stuff in our Earth is so deep down that we couldn't probably never reach it.
Where's my astrophysicist when I need him? Where's Brendan Drackler? Let's get him on here, little NASA shill that he is. I'm only joking, Brendan. We both joke about being NASA shills, but John, that's something that, you know, that piece of evidence that you kind of came up with at the end there, that's kind of, you don't hear that very often associated with some of these stories, and that's really kind of intriguing. That's really interesting, man.
Yeah, that's good. It's just that some of the ones that I was watching today, I hadn't seen them before, and
I love when that happens.
I thought I had seen them all.
Yeah, because usually when you go on there, no offense to history, because they do a lot of good kind of programming that people into Freaky Friday or the Kev Baker show, you're going to love it, right? But a lot of the time it's just on cycle, you know. After 2 minutes, you're thinking, oh, not again, I've seen this one. So it's quite good. They must have like a new kind of batch of videos to be playing, John. Always good.
Yeah, it's Kev, because, I mean, these things, do you know, it's got that bad, Kev. I've even got June watching that. Now, you know June, Kev. June just doesn't believe in anything like aliens, anything like that. Non-believer, burner at the stake, Johnny. Until I had showed her some of the evidence that is out there, and she absolutely loves it now. She really does. She wouldn't watch space at one time, but if it's UFOs, June's in on it like a shot. It's great. No, that is good. I've seen somebody talking about Joe Joseph in the chat room there. He's not in there. I just checked, but Joe will be coming up after today's Kev Baker show.
And it's kind of, this is cool. We've got Johnny Whistles here. We were going to get into Schrodinger's kittens. I think I'll leave that for the last segment of the show now. Potentially. Might need a whole hour of the show for that. It's a big, huge article, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. Yeah, we'll do it in the last segment, but since John's been talking UFOs and things there, this came up in the live stream the other night, Johnny, and we were talking about a potential cloaked UFO that had been filmed over United Arab Emirates. Now, it came from a really questionable source, Scott Waring. Looks like CGI. But that being said, cloaked UFOs, I would imagine that's a given, right? If you can travel between the stars or interdimensionally, I think cloaking yourself in this kind of reality, our time space, that's probably a doozy, right? It's a given.
I would say so, Kev, because Kev, we're working on cloak technology ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Now, I don't know if you can remember the video in Iraq, Kev, of the soldier running. And it looked like, all you could see was a silhouette of the actual soldier running and jumping into the tank and getting into the tank. Now, you couldn't see the soldier. All you could see was a wall behind him. It was the craziest thing I have ever seen. Now, if we've got that, they've got that. Probably a million times better advanced than what we've got. So they could do that quite easily, Craig. Quite easily. If we can't find things in radar, even when they're right in front of their nose, do you know what I mean? Then they can definitely quote their ship.
I would imagine. Yeah, I'd imagine it'd be probably quite easy for them to do that. Like I say, if they've got some way of travelling across the universe, Johnny, I imagine, tricking our eyes, tricking our technology from seeing them. Not a problem. Just a flick of a switch. Big grey finger flicks the switch and away they go. Who knows? Maybe a big Nordic finger. I don't know. But this one, this video that I was talking about from Scott C. Waring, and I'm sorry, Bison, sorry, but when it comes to Scott C. Waring, I don't know if he's got a deal with, like, the Express and the Daily Mail newspaper, because they're one of the two go-to characters they always go to. And it's the most questionable evidence that you can offer up. So why do they always go to Scott C. Waring, and why do they always go to Secure Team 10? Because all it does is, drive a lot of traffic there. What's a lot of traffic, mate? A lot of traffic makes a lot of clicks. A lot of clicks means a lot of ad money. And I'm a suspicious mind, Johnny, but I honestly think when it comes to the news group that owns, the Express and some of our other kind of tabloid ones over here, the ones that always carry these same YouTubers, I'm honestly, again, speculating, but I think there's a connection because big money to be made if they keep pushing the ones that they do push.
Well, Kev, that video, I can remember watching that, and see, honestly, I don't know what it is. Some kind of weather phenomenon. Who knows? It's
a punch cloud. They're actually a known phenomenon, John. Punch cloud, yeah.
Now, the Express, as you say, that's a newspaper, part of the usual propaganda for making these things look like you're an idiot.
Yep.
And anybody that's telling you that there is an alien ship that's decloaked, that's what they're aiming for. Do you know what I mean?
I'm not very impressed by it, Johnny. I'm not very impressed by this blue twinkly LED light that's decloaked. No.
It's just crazy, Kev.
Well,
it makes us look really daft. That's the worst about it, Kev. Because as you say, they don't go to the people who have put out videos out there that have actually looked at something and go, oh my God, what is that? No. They go for that, and they go for Secure Team.
And it's like my personal favourite subject, if I had to take one kind of form of woo, and that's all I could take to a desert island with me, Johnny, it'd be time travel, right? I love time travel, everything to do with it, even if it is just some kind of thought experiment we can only do in our head. Doesn't matter, right? But the same paper, the Express, and I've covered this before, and I'm going to do it again, because they often cover time travel, right? And you think, well, cool, that's awesome. And this one says time travel shock reveal, and it's that a woman from 3800 shows photo taken from the future, right? Mm-hmm. And then you look at where it comes from, and yet again, it's a YouTube channel called Apex TV. Now, either this YouTube channel, who aren't really that big outside of anything, you know, apart from making these very questionable kind of time travel or videos, either they've got the only working time traveling machine in the universe, like in our timeline, Johnny, and yet they're still stuck on a YouTube channel, or I'm calling shenanigans. And why would somebody from the year 3800 need to blank their face out? Really?
Yeah.
Do you think maybe they had to blank their face out because people like me would go, "What? I went to school with that daft idiot. They're not from the year 3800." But all that being said, I do think in the world of black military operations, stuff we don't know about, John, you better believe if they haven't got it, they're definitely working on some temporal access technology. If you can travel about in time, dude, I think you pretty much rigged the game then.
Well, Kev, when people talk about time travel, I mean, some people think that you're just absolutely crazy. And I always say to them that, do you know that every time that you look up in the sky, you actually look back in time? Because if you've got a star that is 2.5 million years away, 2.5 million light years away, Kev, then that star that you're looking at, the light that you're seeing right at that precise moment is from 2.5 million years ago. So you're actually looking back in time every time you look into space. So I don't really see how there's any problem that we can actually go forward, because I think, as you say, Kev, the Black Ops, the things that they're working on, things that we will never probably find out about, they've got it all working in front of them, Kevin. What they're doing with it is the thing, Kev, because if they're doing nefarious things with it, do you know what I mean? I don't think anything that is used is going to be to our advantage.
No, absolutely. Never to our advantage, John. I think we can agree on that. And even closer to home, right? You're talking about looking at this star, and rightly so. It's all that time away in the past. There's a realistic possibility. It's not even there anymore, right? But even our own star. Anytime you look up at the sun, you get that, oh, burnt my eyes feeling. That was the sun 8 minutes ago. Because even from that distance, our sun, and it's, let me see here, the average distance from the Earth to the sun is 499.0 light seconds. Not light years, light seconds, folks. So what they say is it takes 8 minutes, I'm seeing here, I believe.
I'm not sure if it's 8 minutes or 8 seconds, Kev.
That's 8 minutes, it says here, yeah. We don't only see the sun 8 minutes in the past, we actually see the past of everything in space. There it is, yeah. So 8 minutes. You know, if something started happening on the surface of the sun that we would see, Johnny, it would still take us 8 minutes. It would be like happening for 8 minutes before we would see it. That's one of these things when I first kind of, I can't remember who told me when we were looking up at the night sky about what you were on about there, how everything's away in the past. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was just in awe, absolute awe that you were looking at something and it wasn't now. You're seeing things.
May not even be there, Kev.
And you talk about time travel, John. Like you say, you're seeing light that's travelled 2 million years. You're seeing light that's travelled 4 years from Alpha Centauri. You're seeing all of these different times it took the light to get here. It's almost like looking at an entire timeline of the universe.
Yep. It's fantastic when you start thinking about it that way, that you're actually looking back in time, because some of these stars might not even be there anymore. Do you know what I mean? That itself is incredible.
Well, I was listening to a thing the other day, funny enough, we're talking about time. Time interests me. And the Royal Institute, they put on YouTube videos of presentations, and it's Oxford, I believe. I think it's Oxford. It's the same place where Faraday stood and demonstrated the electromagnetic fields and stuff like that. Really famous kind of scientific place anyway. This guy was on about time, Johnny. Man, oh man, did he pickle my head. Because he was saying, realistically, and we've said it before, the only time that exists is now, right? Right? I mean, it's now, because by the time you've even thought that, it's in the past and the future hasn't quite come yet. So you live in the now, always now. Now. But my now's different from your now. Because when you say you're living, or it's now, well, by the time you say that to me, that now's already passed. And I'm in a different now. So everybody is in their own now. And that means there is no now. Because there's nothing solid to it. It's all different. It's all about perspective. It's all about your perception. Crazy, Johnny.
Just try to mess with my brain, Kevin.
Think of how I felt, dude. It was like about 3 a.m. I'm suffering from this crazy insomnia, and some guy's got a big string across this auditorium. And he's talking about, well, this is where we are in the timeline right now. But we're not here anymore, so we're not here now. And I need to move it. I need to keep moving it because now isn't fit. Oh, man. Yeah, it was kind of deep, Johnny. Kind of deep.
Would be.
Well, I've got a story that we can get into. I had one dug up for the last segment of the show, but we can hit it now. And we're going to my favourite website. And we're going home for me. Yes, I'm going back to the banks of Loch Ness. And in fact, this story actually mentions where I was born and where I grew up. And it also, there's a connection to one of the family stories I've shared on here about the Loch Ness Monster. So it's back to the mysterious universe and Nick Redfern. And Nick, if you're listening, if you catch this, I've emailed you twice now. Please get back in touch because we all had such a good time when you hung out on here before. I think you were meant to stay for an hour. You ended up staying for 2 and it was a blast. It was a hoot. Let's get you back on again, man, because I want to get into stuff like this here. This is another example of the paranormal nature of lake monsters. You see, Johnny, there's that English thing going on. Lake monsters, lakes. We don't do lakes in Scotland, John. Loch. Exactly. And wait till you hear some of the Scottish sounding names I'm about to get into in just a moment. Honestly, you couldn't even spell these things out in Scrabble. There's not enough letters. So it says here, in May 1977, the infamous monster raiser Tony Doc Shields and his wife Chris took a train from their from their home in Truro, Cornwall, England, to the heart of the mysterious ancient Scotland. It was a trip destined to have an amazing and controversy-filled outcome. Matters all began on the morning of Saturday, May 21st, and the Shields, along with 2 friends, Richard and Lynn Smith of Carharrick and a couple from the English town of Bolton, were standing and chatting on the car park of the hotel in which they were staying, the Inchnacardick Lodge, overlooking Loch Ness. Now, Inchnacardick Bay, which is right at the loch and right at the hotel, is where I've mentioned the story about my grandfather, great-grandfather, when they seen the horse coming down off the hill that had the figure on it, the entity, the apparition that looked like a red Indian. And it crossed in front of them and it went down in through the fog into the water and disappeared. It's exactly the same location, folks, okay? So it says here, suddenly Chris noticed something amazing. 3 significantly sized humps that snaked through the waters of Loch Ness in the direction of Fort Augustus, where yours truly was born and bred. Yes, indeed. Whether one large creature or 3 entirely separate and smaller ones, it was impossible to tell. But the important thing was that it was something was there for all 6 to see and marvel upon. Now, disastrously, not a single one of them had a camera in hand. And remember, this is 1977, folks. It's not when everyone's wandering about with a top-of-the-range iPhone or anything. And it says here, which was hardly a surprise, since the only reason for standing outside was to await the opening of the breakfast area. Now, Shields considered making a dash for their hotel room, but was thwarted from doing so when the 3 humps slipped beneath the waves, and the beast, or beasts, was gone. It was something that mirrored the lessons learned by Ted Holliday that the Nessie and cameras are not always the best of friends. Shields learned a cautionary lesson himself. He vowed never again to be camera-free while hanging out at Loch Ness. It was a very wise decision, as the events of only a few hours later spectacularly served to demonstrate. Now, after partaking of a few pints of Guinness and a couple of small single malts in the hotel bar, Doc and Chris walked towards Urquhart Castle from the Lewiston Road. Now, as they did so, the pair noticed a number of curious wakes in the water, something which was a mild precursor to what was very quickly to follow. Around 4 p.m, Doc decided to climb the castle's old Grant Tower and scan the expansive waters that it overlooked. To Doc's amazement, in just mere moments, and as if right on cue, what appeared to be a very small head broke the surface of the loch. It was followed by a long, serpent-like neck. The creature was clearly of a significant size, since the portion of the neck that could be seen was protruding out of the water to a height of at least 4 to 5 feet. Never mind how much more was still underneath the water. Interestingly, Shields had a sudden feeling that the creature had actually readied itself to be photographed by him. He quickly snapped a couple of shots, which displayed the animal's green-brown neck and its pale, somewhat yellowish front. The head was absurdly small and the mouth continually agape. In moments it sank beneath the surface of the loch. Now Doc was beyond delighted, as was Chris, when he quickly and excitedly told her of what he'd just seen and photographed. Despite the pair diligently checking out the loch for the next few days, nothing else of meaningful nature occurred. It was now time to head back home to Cornwall and get the photographs developed, as in quick-fire time. The reel of film was handed over to a local journalist and friend, David Clark, who in turn gave it to the New Key Colour Services, a company that did most of the developing for a local magazine that Clark worked on called Cornish Life. Now, to the delight of David and Doc, the images looked near perfect. Shields had caught the beast in just about the best pose possible. Some suggested the best pose was just too good to be true, which is hardly surprising, given Doc's reputation as a skilled magician and wizard. Welcome back, everyone, and for the final time this week, says Kev Baker, and it's the final part of the Kev Baker show for this week. Don't panic, folks. I'll be back next week. Don't be crying at me. It's okay. I'm only joking. Yes, we're going to wrap things up today. I've got Whistles here with me. This is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The listeners are probably getting ready to skin me alive like Schrodinger's cat, because I've been teasing them for days about Schrodinger's kittens. But all will be revealed shortly, folks. Don't worry. We'll have Schrodinger's kittens on Monday, or maybe one of the various streams over the weekend. And don't forget, Nano Girl will be on a stream over the weekend. So hopefully see you all there for that. I think that's 12:30 on the West Coast, 3:30 on the East Coast, and 8:30 over here in the UK. And of course, I'll have Joe Joseph and the rest of the Maniacs later on that night on a live stream as well. Just can't get enough of it. But Johnny Whistles is here, and we were getting into the Loch Ness Monster, Johnny. Loch Ness Monster, that's got to be one of the biggest pool for tourists, I think, that Scotland has, right?
Yeah, it is, Kev, because it's one of those things that people have been looking for the Loch Ness Monster for years. And as you say, it is quite camera shy for some reason. But I was watching a documentary the other day, Kevin. It was about the Loch Ness Monster, and what they were doing is they had a couple of divers, and they were sending them down to see this rock face. Now, the two of them were absolutely freaked out when they were only about maybe 30 feet down, because they didn't know which way was up and which way was down. So, but what they were trying to do was find the caves that is in Loch Ness that we know of, Kev. Do you know what I mean? It is a very, very deep loch. And there is caves that go all over the place. But nobody knows where they actually go to.
Well, that was one of the kind of rites of passage, you call it, Johnny, growing up in Fort Augustus. You go to the pier, as we called it, right at the mouth of Loch Ness. And the Caledonian Canal, just the mouth of that spews into Loch Ness. And you walk out there. And you used to do it as a dare, as a kid, you know. You'd walk out so far. And I knew where my limit was. It was just round about the belly button. And what the thing was, the big dare was, Johnny, is that it's a shelf. It's literally just a shelf, and it drops straight down. And like you say, it's so cavernous, the loch, that there are plenty of places, inlets, that we've never, ever explored, never seen, where potentially things could live. You know, we talk about the tunnels that go from Scotland to Turkey as well, John. A very interesting kind of feature that they've turned up and proven in recent times. And where do these tunnels go to, you know? It just adds to the whole mystery. But it was interesting hearing you about the divers there, and I'll let you finish in a second, because that's another story from, like, Fort Augustus, a local story. And it was back in, I can't remember what year it was, but somebody had burnt a boat and somebody on it, and obviously tragedy. But the people who went to recover the boat, or the person who had lost their life, they basically had to send in like deep sea divers, John, because it went down off one of these shelves. And the rumour has it, I say it's rumour because I wasn't there, but what they described, and all they described, because they never spoke about it again, was it was akin to being in the bowels of hell. And like you say there, you don't know which way's up, which way's down. These were experienced divers, dude. Now, part of the story goes, and I'm leaning on the side of this just being part of the lore, you know, part of the kind of story. But when one of the dudes took off his helmet, you're talking about the guy had turned grey in the hair. Now, whether that part of the story's true or not, or just added for, you know, a little bit of pizzazz, there is truth to that story. And that is that when you go beneath the surface of that loch, it's like a different world. You know, they say if they drained the loch, John, actually removed all of the water there, you would have enough space to fit all of the population in the world in the space that you had actually emptied out. That's how big you're talking. You're talking 26 miles long and a mile wide. And then all of these caverns that we don't know anything about as well, Johnny. It's another world.
It's fantastic. If it was easier to see, Kev, I think there would be maybe a lot more exploration done, because I think it would cost a lot of money to do that kind of thing. We can use sonar, which is good, but it's not going to show us what we really want to see. Do you know what I mean? We want maybe an ROV to go into a cave somewhere. That's what I'm looking for, maybe somebody doing something like that, but we haven't seen it yet. But
okay, there's again, another one, Johnny, right? Money. At the Fort Augustus end. In this story, it appeared, and then it disappeared. And this added to all of it, right? But they were, I try to remember what age I would have been. School age anyway, because I was still living at home. But they were doing some kind of survey in the loch. And from time to time, there'd be various kind of missions, scientific things going on. I remember one time Adrian Moon, or Adrian Shine, I think his name is. They had a big net. You probably remember that, John. They constructed this big thing and they were going to fly up the loch with it. All these kind of crazy things going on. But, yeah, what they found was, and this is weird, it was like a series of pillars, concrete or rock pillars, and they were at a regular distance apart, John, be it 10 foot, be it 100 foot. It's irrelevant, right? And there was a number of them, 6 or 7. Never any record of any construction going on in the loch, obviously, ever. Now, they checked with the MOD, because you can imagine, and to this day, it's a training ground for the jets coming out of Lossiemouth and places like that. They go down there to practice the bombing runs. So there was people, maybe it was something from World War II, maybe some training thing, learning where to drop bombs with dam busters kind of stuff going on, because it's that kind of body of water, right? No. Military, no, nothing to do with us. And nobody can ever remember anybody ever building pillars in there. And as quickly as that story emerged, it went away again. How weird is that? That's like some underwater structures in Loch Ness that nobody can remember being built.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That is weird, Kev.
Yep. I'd need to get my mum on.
It's not the kind of a place that you would think there would be a structure. Do you know what I mean?
But that being said, John, if they had turned around and said, well, listen, this was some kind of thing we used for ranging, dropping bombs, practicing during... Yeah. I would have been right, fair enough, fair dues. I can see where they're coming from there. But no, nothing. And more importantly, nobody remembers anybody building anything. I mean, I think the locals themselves would have some kind of stories about the people that came and built stuff in the loch, Oh, no, yeah, nothing. Definitely. Nothing, dude.
Wow.
That's weird, huh? Weird, man.
That is weird, Kev.
So what else happened in this documentary, dude?
That was just that they were looking for the caves, Kev, but end up they actually had to give up. They sent an ROV down, and the usual thing that happens with these things, it broke down, and they had to cancel the whole thing because they only had that day left. It usually, they say for some reason when they do these things at Loch Ness, that the equipment that they're using, Kev, somehow goes out of commission.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. It's pretty weird because there's a lot of stories about that.
Do you think that might have, do you think it might have something to do, or do you think it might be a reason? There might be something going on there, Johnny, in that geographical location that pushed Aleister Crowley to choose that location over any other in the world. A man of, extreme wealth, could have bought a property anywhere, but he bought it in the back end of the Highlands, windy as hell, never a nice day, rarely a nice day, should I say. So why did he go there? It's almost as if there is already something magical to that location.
Wow, okay. Scotland is a magical place, isn't it?
Well, come on, Johnny. I mean, we've got the Kelpies, man.
Yeah, exactly. They were there to keep anything from entering our water and spoiling the waters in Scotland with the Kelpies. And they were shapeshifters as well, Kev, were they not?
That's my number one theory, hypothesis on what we're looking at with the Loch Ness Monster, John. And I say that because you've had the various sightings with humps. And if we just say one of them's real, okay, we've got a humped creature in there. We've had various sightings with no humps. Just looks like a flat kind of whale-like thing under the water. No humps protruding. We've got some reports of long neck, some reports no long neck. Either there's a whole host of different beasties that we haven't found in there, and that starts to get ridiculous that we haven't found any, or there's one that can change shape. That story as well about the horse coming down off the hill and just going into the loch. I mean, the Kelpie, it's a horse, right? It's a shape-shifting horse.
Okay, these scientists that I was talking about, they think that there is definitely something giant in Loch Ness. And although they haven't got any facts, they're going with people's stories. And the people that have told the stories, that they know there's nothing wrong with them, do you know what I mean? They're just ordinary people. And they said to themselves, no, he said, this is something, he says, one day we'll find it, he said, because where it goes when it's in the loch, we don't know. But it comes up in the loch, and when we do, he says, we'll catch it someday.
Imagine if they caught it, Whistles. Can you imagine they actually caught the Loch Ness Monster? That's what we would do, isn't it? We wouldn't just observe it and let it go back to being that cool little beastie it is. We would want to catch it and parade it, dude.
Yeah, and kill it probably, Kev.
Most likely. But no, Fort Augustus, that whole area, the Great Glen, definitely some energetic woo going on up there. And I think that's why it's such a hotbed for people that do practice. You would call it black magic, I suppose. To this day, that goes on, Johnny. It was a thing when I was younger as well. For a place with so few people there, it's almost, it's an anomaly that so many people are into the dark stuff like that, I suppose you would say.
Yeah. No, I mean, Scotland has always been that kind of a magical place, Kev. That's I mean, when you look back at our history is kind of a magical, do you know what I mean? Some of the stories that's been told over the times they're amazing. It's like nothing else really, and that's why everybody loves the Scottish history, because it is so fascinating. The stories that were told, the people that were actually on this land that fought for it as well, Kev. Their stories, it's just fantastic. We have an amazing history.
No, we do, and we've got the giants as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've got stories of giants. I mean, Joe Joseph, he likes to talk about the giants and things, but you don't need to go any further than Scotland or Ireland for that kind of stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ireland, big on the giants as well. I mean, I can remember a guy, it was an Irish fella from Dublin who I worked with, and he told me a story about two giants that fought each other, and they were throwing rocks, Kev. You know, the rocks were, these things were massive, and that's what one hit or some other one, do you know what I mean, with the rocks, and then that brother took over. And fascinating story, but again, it's giants that they're talking about. Do you know what I mean? When people think that there wasn't such a thing as giants, why are they in everybody's folklore? That's the thing.
Exactly right, Johnny Whistles. Exactly right. And I was just looking at the old Google Earth there, you know, reminiscing of home, you know, up in Loch Ness, back in Shrekland. But there's ley lines or something going on up there, folks. There truly, truly is. There's too many kind of weird, paranormal, supernatural stories going on in that one little area of the UK, let alone, you know, a tiny little pinprick of the world when you look about it, you know, in relation to the size that we're talking about here. So, I don't know, John. Definitely, we come from magical stock, my friend. We certainly do. And I'm going to get back to this story. We'll finish off this story about Loch Ness, and we'll see what was happening here. We left it when it got really interesting, actually, because it was talking about, like, warlocks and wizards and magicians and things, John. Yeah, here we go. So, cool. It's about David and Doc. People have probably forgotten what we were talking about now. It says, Doc quickly contacted another local journalist and friend, Mike Truscott, who immediately put a call into the Glasgow, Scotland, Daily Record newspaper, whose news desk expressed major interest in Doc's pictures. Just to let people know, though, the Daily Record, or as myself and Johnny call it, the Daily Ranger, they would report on anything. They're pretty kind of fast and loose when it comes to journalistic integrity. Just saying. It says here that the photo editor at the Daily Record, Martin Gilfeather, there's a good Scottish name for you, Gilfeather Whistles, requested that Doc send, via train for speed, both processed pictures for his team to see and study. It was wise of Doc, as it turned out, that he chose to only send one. To his credit, Gilfeather asked for the rest of the film to be sent so that he could confirm Doc and Chris really had been in Scotland, and specifically at the Loch. Now, a study of the negatives by Gilfeather demonstrated that the photos of Nessie were taken exactly where Doc had claimed, at Loch Ness. Indeed, as the roll of negative showed, the two images were sandwiched right in between a variety of shots of Loch Ness, Uckert Castle, and the Inchnacardick Lodge Hotel. Gilfeather even phoned the hotel to get confirmation that Shields had stayed there. The owner confirmed they did, and on the very days in question. Now, impressed by all of this validation, it wasn't long before the Daily Record, published the story, as did the Daily Mirror. Again, another reputable red top rag that operates over here in the UK, and from the same news group, may I add, as did the Daily Mirror, one of the nation's biggest selling tabloid newspapers. At this point, things got very strange and dark. We like it when it gets strange and dark. So what happened next, I hear you asking? Well, let's continue, shall we? As Shields himself noted, the newspaper promised to send all my pictures back at once, but it was almost 2 nail-biting weeks before I received the monster slide. My holiday snaps had been temporarily displaced, and I haven't seen them since. Tim Dinsdale had warned me about this kind of thing. But it didn't end there. No. Things got even stranger. David Blenchley was a Falmouth-based photographer who mailed a copy of one of the priceless images to a man named Max Maven. Now, he's a psychic, magician, an American member of the Psychic 7 International team. I wonder if he's won any gold medals at the Olympics. And someone who, in later years, worked for the acclaimed stage magicians Penn and Teller. Now, somewhere between Falmouth, England, and Boston, Massachusetts, the image vanished from what was a well-sealed and protected package. It was never seen again. Now, another attempt to share the image failed miserably when a glass slide prepared by Cornwall journalist Frank Durham was accidentally broken and shattered into pieces. Now, Shields, acutely aware of the power of real magic, viewed all of this as a kind of growing supernatural menace. It wasn't the end of the story, however. There was far worse to come. And do you notice how my tones change now, folks? Because I've been touched by the magic that happens up there. All right, I've seen some of the stuff that happens up there. And my tongue-in-cheek laughing about all of this has rapidly ran down the back of my leg, Johnny whistles, and we'll be taking this a lot more seriously in concluding. So it says there, Dr. David Hoy, who was part of the PSI team, suffered a heart attack. Major Leslie May, also of the team, was stricken with ill health. Several of the members investigating the sightings at Lake Cockcall vanished without a trace. And Doc had a son injured in a motorbike accident. One of his daughters was thrown off a horse and another was hit by mysterious stomach pains. The family's pair of pet cats died, and rather bizarrely, Doc accidentally set his own beard on fire, but thankfully with no lasting effects. Not surprisingly, Shields knew when it was time to back off. And the time was now. He knew he had been pushing his luck throughout the entire exercise, but now it was clear he had pushed that same luck way too far. The supernatural backlash had reached breaking point, and it was a dark development which on July 7th, 1977, led Doc Shields to sever all ties with the rest of those attached to the experiments to raise real monsters. Booga booga, Johnny whistles. It was a good story, that, wasn't it?
Wow.
Eh? Yeah, touched by the magic, dude. Somebody didn't want that slide getting seen.
It seems like it is, you know what I mean? I think it's once is...
Well, all joking aside, when I was growing up...
Coincidence, two is happenstance, three, you get an enemy.
When I was growing up, Johnny, I mean, it was quite open that there was people practicing dark arts, shall we say? Mm-hmm. You know, going as far as sacrificing on like the animal scale, not for 1 minute suggesting anything nefarious with human sacrifice or anything took place, but certainly on the animal scale, a couple of occasions that was happening, farms up that way. So funny how, and I suppose it goes on everywhere in the world. It's not kind of confined to the banks of Loch Ness. I'm not that naive. However, if there's an energy there, John, and it's trying to express itself, or maybe it's optimum to magic, maybe that explains a few of the things, right? That explains the good-looking dude at the dance that my granny was at. You know, that one that ran out the dance hall when the lights came on. He only ran out because his kilt showed that he had hairy legs and hoofed feet.
That, Kev, see if I would have seen that I think that just might have freaked me out, you know what I mean?
Well, in your kind of absence from the show, we came across a story, John, about Pan. And Pan is the entity that Aleister Crowley famously drew. It looked like the grey alien. It's got the big eyes, the big head. It was talking about how Pan also had, get this, hairy legs and cloven feet.
Oh, no way.
So you've had Aleister Crowley trying to open a portal on the banks of Loch Ness, and an entity years later, decades later, after Crowley's passed, that resembles Pan, the thing that Crowley was trying to raise from the other side. Of course, coincidences happen, John, right? Not in our world.
Yeah, but that is a bit crazy.
Oh, dude, I've missed you, man. This has been cool. We've spent an hour talking about all the cool stuff in the world, you know, without getting distracted by that pesky politics that I was ranting about in the first hour of the show. I've missed you, Johnny.
Honestly, I have missed it too, Kev. I really have. So
don't lie. I've heard you've not missed it at all. I've heard you're actually working for QAnon now.
I didn't want to tell you. Myself and John B. Wells.
They got to you, dude. They got to you. I knew they would do it, Johnny. And they wouldn't get to me. They'd get to somebody I love. I bloody knew it. I spotted that Anne one. I think she was looking at Q posts the other day as well. I don't know. Looked like something interesting on her phone for once. Ooh, you can tell she's got headphones on, Johnny. She can't hear me.
Well,
don't tell anyone. There's like tens of thousands of people around the world. I'm going to get battered if she finds out. So what else has been happening in the land of whistles, man? Can we look forward to maybe some Johnny time next week? And I know it's all health kind of permitting. Yeah. So it's random. I get that, dude. But look at the fun we've had here tonight, you know?
I know, Kevin. Honestly, I mean, this tonight has just showed me how much I have missed it, mate, because this has been brilliant. Great having a chat that we have, Kev. Just the kind of things that we love talking about. So, fantastic. I've loved it.
Exactly, man. Exactly. I was going to ask you any new Mandela effects, but I imagine life is like a Mandela effect these days, John.
Kev, I was...
I'm terrible, isn't I? I've got honestly, no shame, man.
I was sitting today watching the TV, okay? And it's a space program. Sitting watching it for probably 3/4 of an hour. And then the adverts come on. And I turned the sound down because I hate adverts, they just annoy me. And I'm sitting there saying, what is it I'm watching? Hadn't a clue until it came back on. Dude, now, that's the way my brain works right now, Kev.
Johnny, you see, people say that getting old and things, that's the downside. Me and my mum, we play Scrabble every night. Yeah, you can laugh at me out there. I'm still a mum's boy, 42. Play Scrabble on Facebook every night after the show. Shoot me, right? But what we've discovered is she'll now be able to enjoy programs that she's seen before, maybe a few years ago, like a box set. Something, cop show, murder, something like that. And even though she's seen it, it's like she's watching it for the first time again because she can't remember it. So there is a flip side to everything, dude.
Yeah,
you can watch Apocalypse Now for the first time again.
Well, that's what June was telling me the other day there. She says, you've got a lot of TV to watch now. So
that's it, dude. That's it. And it's like I was saying to people at the start of the show, you know. People say, oh, watching the TV, it's a distraction. Doing this is a distraction. Everything's a distraction, folks, because, you know, you're the only one that matters. That's the only truth you can take from this, because you're the center of your universe, right? And you can let all of this stuff get on top of you. Stuff you can't change. You're never going to be able to change it. Or you can learn to be like me in whistles, and you can see the comedy aspect in all of it. And if it is just a big simulation and it all is just a big game, you know, like I was saying, definitely a big game in politics, right? Then, you know, maybe we should just do it with a smile on our face. So until I distract you again on Monday, I'll be back tomorrow night, though. Freaky Friday. Don't forget Freaky Friday. I almost forgot Freaky Friday. You can't forget Freaky Friday. Wherever you are, make it TFR.
And didn't touch that dial.
There it is. There it is.